time to get into today. Personally, I support the consequentialist position, but it looks like Clegg doesn't. Preventing prisoners from voting doesn't make sense from the consequentialist point of view. There's no evidence to suggest that it aids in reform or deterrence. In fact, it's thought to be an obstacle to rehabilitation. Allegedly, one of the reasons that the Republic of Ireland was so keen to give prisoners the vote was to instill in them a sense of civic responsibility through participation. This is something that the Prison Reform Trust also support. They're very much experts in the area. They say that social exclusion contributes to reoffending. It also has bad consequences that speak against doing it. In America and in my country, problems arise from racially skewed criminal justice systems. In the US, almost 40% of prisoners are black, which means that black people are having their voting rights removed much more than any other group. And since black voters overwhelmingly vote Democrat, or at least they have in every election since 1976, by my research, that will have an impact on the political landscape. Interestingly, denying prisoners the vote also correlates with lower voter turnout amongst non-prisoners. Mao's suggested explanation for this is that since we talk about politics with each other and voting is kind of a communal thing, we discuss the candidates with each other, if some communities have many members in prison, then that social effect on turnout will be reduced. But still, the retributivist will say that despite these consequences, prisoners do not deserve to vote. Having your vote taken away for breaking the law is justified punishment, even if it disproportionately costs society to do it. So to answer the retributivist, we are going to need something stronger. We don't have to look very far to find something else, at least not in the UK. Suppose that denying prisoners the vote is justified punishment, consequences be damned. Well then, it's not a terribly well-designed system of punishment. Susan Easton points out that it is disproportionate. It is literally not in proportion to the nature of your crime. Whether you are a pickpocket or a multiple murderer, that aspect of your punishment is the same, if you get the punishment, because it's also arbitrary. You are only going to be affected by it if you happen to be in prison during a general election year, which means that some prisoners who have committed the same crimes get unequal punishments. So even if you are retributivist about punishment, this is still not a sensible move. You can't maintain that actions deserve some punishment if the punishment is not at all linked to those actions and only some of the people who perform those actions even get the punishment. Prime Minister David Cameron has said that the thought of prisoners voting makes him physically sick. And this is a man who allegedly f***ed a dead pig's head, so it probably takes a lot to turn this man's stomach, and maybe a lot of people feel a little bit uneasy at the thought of people in prison voting. But with respect to those feelings, that's just not a very good argument. Whether you feel a certain way is not the same as whether you are justified in acting on those feelings. The Canadian Supreme Court, by the way, decided to give prisoners the vote when they were shown that the retributivist arguments don't work in 2002 Suave v. Canada. Which leads me, finally, to... By now, we've seen that there aren't really any good reasons for denying prisoners the vote, but you don't just have to take my word for it, or the word of all the people I've cited, because when it comes to the UK, there is a frankly embarrassing legal history of the government being told to fix the problem and doing nothing about it. In 2005, there was a famous legal case called Hurst v United Kingdom. John Hurst, a former prisoner, lodged a complaint with the European Court of Human Rights because he had been denied the chance to vote while in prison. The court ruled that a blanket ban on prisoners voting was contrary to the European Convention on Human Rights. It is officially, legally, a human rights violation. But the story doesn't end there. Legislation was drafted to try and give prisoners the vote, but Parliament rejected it and nothing happened. And then in 2010 there was another legal case, Greens and MT v United Kingdom. The human rights courts reiterated that denying prisoners the vote was a human rights violation. And then again, last year, Firth and others v United Kingdom. The government lost again, and then again this year, McHugh and others v United Kingdom. The government lost again. At this point, the British government has lost in court more times than Andy Murray. They've been told 4 times that they are violating their own citizens' human rights, and they've done nothing about it. And I feel like John Oliver up here. I'm just going, can we please sort this out, government? Sort it out, government! Sort it all out! Now you might well be asking, why do we need to do what the European Union tells us? Britain should decide this for itself. And yeah, okay, that is what the Prime Minister has also said. But even if you think that the rulings of international human rights courts have no bearing on the discussion at all, we've still got no reason to do this. We've still got all the arguments we looked at before, which show that it's pretty pointless. Now, I'm not trying to use YouTube to launch some kind of weak source revolution. I'm not Russell Brand. I was quite surprised to find, and the people I've spoken to have been quite surprised to find, that the arguments for taking the vote away from prisoners are as weak as they are. I don't know anyone in prison, I don't have a horse in this race or any obvious biases that I'm aware of. This isn't something I'd even really thought about before I started researching this video. But if you're in the UK and prisoners voting is something that you think should happen, then maybe consider not being quiet about that. Because I assumed that there would be some charity or campaign trying to make this happen, but there's not. There's hardly anybody talking about this at the ground level. There is the Prison Reform Trust, but when I reached out to them, and I tried very hard to find a sponsor for this video, so I know there's hardly anyone talking about it. When I reached out to them, they said that they don't run public campaigns. They only speak directly to government ministers, as if politicians will stick their necks out on this without demonstrable public backing. And I guess most people want to do with prisoners what maybe we all want to do with prisoners sometimes, just put them somewhere far away and not think about it. But this is a pointless human rights violation of about 85,000 British citizens, and it's happening right now, today. And let's not forget, there but for the grace of God go we. We're all subject to criminal temptations. This could happen to you tomorrow. So although I don't usually get directly involved in this sort of thing, this time, if you want to send this video to your MP or share it with somebody or whoever, then please do that, because you are needed. What do you guys think? Should prisoners be allowed to vote? And if not, why not? Next time I'm going to be doing a collaboration video with NerdSync on who is Superman ethically required to save. I'm very excited for it, so don't forget to tune in for that, and for more philosophical videos every Friday, please subscribe. This episode was sponsored by my patrons on Patreon: Jesse Austin, Emiliano Haynes, Alan Falloon, Intimidating Scones, Grasped in Thought, Rich Clark, DJ McIsaac, and Jeffrey, as well as everybody else who chose to donate anonymously. All your names are in the description. So thank you very much to all of those people for their massive generosity, and if you want to earn rewards by sponsoring the show, then you can find me on Patreon. The last two videos we talked about artificial intelligence and Stoicism, so let's have a look at some comments. A few people suggested that Stoicism was quite similar to Taoism or Taoism or some forms of Buddhism. I have to say, I know absolutely nothing about any of those, including what the correct pronunciations are, so if anyone this week wants to give a quick rundown in the comments in just a couple of sentences on what those are and how they're similar to Stoicism or not, then please do that. Please do expand on those, because I would really like to learn. Peyton Malcolm said that if the Stoics tell us to control our emotions, well, can't our emotions be useful sometimes? You gave the example of pro athletes who use their emotions to get pumped up and then achieve great things. And an example closer to my heart would be acting. When I act and I'm on stage, I need to tap into my emotions in order to achieve a really good performance. So yeah, maybe the Stoics are missing out on something there if they're telling us to always curb our passions. Maybe they could come back on us and say, well, you can use reason to do those things as well. I don't know, but yeah, good comment. Camille Gregor said that Stoicism was an appropriate philosophy for an age where the known world was ruled by a tyrannical and pretty brutal empire, the Roman Empire. And yeah, I guess maybe it is. If you're living under the Roman Empire, you probably don't have control over lots of your life, and Stoicism tells you to be happy with what you can't control, then maybe that explains its popularity. There is, I guess, something almost a little bit sinister about Stoicism when applied to oppressed minorities, because it tells us that the universe is maximally rational and that we should accord our will with the universe. And you could read that as don't fight back, don't rise up, don't challenge authority, just sort of go with the flow and be passive and accepting. I'm not saying that's the only way you could read Stoicism, but the potential for reading it that way is there, and that's almost a little bit socially sinister. So yeah, great comment again. Andrew Mann and Ian G said about artificial intelligence that if we had a computer which looked so much like it was intelligent, like it passed every Turing test and it was so convincing, then would it really matter for practical purposes whether it was aware and alive or not? I mean, Yeah, I guess that's a fair point.